This is Ingredient Insiders. I'm John Magazino.
And I'm Andrea Parkins.
On each episode of Ingredient Insiders, we'll be speaking with chefs and food writers about their favorite ingredients.
We then speak to the producer of that ingredient to learn its history, how it's made, and why chefs love using it in their restaurants.
Today, we're going to be talking about pâtés, charcuterie, or if you're speaking Italian, salumi. But we're really talking about cured meats and terrines and pâtés.
Yeah, but typically, like you just said it, if you're speaking Italian.
Yes.
So when you said all those things, my mind immediately goes to Italian.
Yes.
But this week's episode, we're talking about French-inspired salumi.
Yeah, well, we're going to be talking with Sébastien Espinasse of Fabrique Delice, which is a San Francisco-based producer of incredible cured meats and incredible pâtés and terrines. And I actually wanted to ask you, are you a fan of the pâté of terrines?
Yes.
Talk to me. What do you like?
So I am typically, and I know that they do both at Fabrique. They do the truffle mousse, they do a black pepper mousse, they do one with port wine, and they also do a country mousse, which is typically like a little more coarse. Personally, I love it like very smooth. You do? I do, like spreadable.
I like the rougher one, like the country style pâté or a green peppercorn pâté.
You like the texture?
I'm happy with it crumbly because also if you really push down on it, it is smooth.
Yep.
I just picture that as like my ultimate like French picnic is like a beautiful baguette, a nice thick slice of a country style pâté or terrine, maybe a bottle of wine, a piece of cheese.
You need wine.
What else do you need? I'm done. That's a meal.
100%. Oh, now that's what I want to eat right now, John.
So we are going to be talking all about these amazing pâtés, terrines, and charcuterie with Sébastien, and I cannot wait.
This season of Ingredient Insiders is brought to you by Bozzini Nuts. Bozzini is the brand of choice among chefs in the finest hotels and restaurants. Their legacy of quality extends to gourmet retail stores, specialty boutiques, grocery distributors, and delis, ensuring you have access to their extensive range of consumer retail packages. It all started in 1886 when Italian immigrant Anthony L. Bozzini began selling nuts by the pound to bakers, street vendors, and individuals during the Great Depression. But Bozzini Nuts isn't just about peanuts. They offer a delightful array of nuts like cashews, almonds, pecans, pistachios, hazelnuts, and more, plus a tempting selection of dried fruit, including apricots, cranberries, figs, dates, prunes, and tomatoes. So whether at the ballpark, in the kitchen, or indulging in some well-deserved self-care, choose Bozzini Nuts. With a legacy spanning 137 years, they're here to serve your needs with the same consistency, reliability, and quality, making them an iconic name in the world of nuts and dried fruits. Bozzini Nuts, tradition, quality, and taste all in one. Taste the legacy today.
This episode is in partnership with The Chef's Warehouse and produced by Gotham Production Studios in New York City. I am so stoked about today. The only thing that's not great about today's episode is that we're not in Colorado, but Chef Ian Palazzola from Frasca Restaurant is in Boulder, Colorado, one of my favorite towns in the entire world. One of the best places anybody could live.
You used to live in Colorado, John.
I did live in Colorado many years ago. I lived in Boulder, actually, during the summer of 1988. Now you know how old I am.
I was 3.
I lived on Pleasant Street in Boulder. And then I lived in Fort Collins, Colorado for a couple of years. And Colorado is very near and dear to my heart. Ian, we're going to let you talk in a second, but I got more to say here. So a very quick, funny story. About a month ago,
Ian.
You sit back, everybody did,
Go.
Have a snifter of brandy. About a month ago, I was in Ojai, California at the Ojai Valley Inn Food and Wine Festival, and I met a woman named Erin Palmer who works for the Frasca Restaurant Group. I know there's an official name, but I'm not saying that correctly. But Erin was working at an event that I was working on, and she made this introduction to the event and was talking about Ingredient Insiders, and I was so flattered and honored. And she said, "Yeah, I listened to a few episodes, and some of the team at Frasca listens to it." And I said, we have to get the Frasca chefs on. and the team from Frasca. So, Ian, we are so honored to have you here. You have the best restaurant in the Rocky Mountains. Are you from Colorado?
No, no, I'm from Roanoke, Virginia, a little small town in Southwest Virginia.
Love it. What brought you to
Yeah.
Colorado? Must have been the skiing.
Yeah, so it definitely was partially that. Growing up in Southwest Virginia, you could travel into West Virginia there to go skiing. So always a big passion of mine. And then as I left Virginia, I went to culinary school in Atlanta, Georgia, and I met someone there who was then moving to Aspen, Colorado. And I had always thought of the mountains, the sunniest state, as a place I would really enjoy to visit, let alone live. So I took the leap and moved to Aspen, Colorado, and ended up working at the Little Nell.
Andrea, I know you haven't been to the Little Nell.
I have not.
I don't know that I've ever been allowed to step foot in the Little Nell, but this is one of the most beautiful hotels in the world. It's at the base of Aspen Mountain. Is it called Ajax? Am I saying that
It
right?
is Ajax. Yep.
And it's spectacular. And I can only imagine what happens on those mornings when at night it's been snowing all night. There's a foot of fresh powder on the ground. The sun is shining at 6 a.m. Do the cooks and the dishwashers call in sick? Like, how do you manage that? Because
Yeah,
a lot of people are out there in that life because they love the skiing and
Mhm. Are
snowboarding.
you bringing your skis or snowboard
How
to
do
work?
you, or
100%.
do you make a few turns in the morning and then show up to work?
Yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
curious.
We could even start it earlier in the night. So as everyone's starting to get off that night, you start seeing the everything going around. People are saying it's starting to snow. It's starting to snow. It's a very fun town. So lots of people like to go out after work. The town shuts down. No one goes out. Everyone goes home, tucks himself in bed, and gets ready for the next day. What's fun about the Little Nell, especially, it's the only ski in, ski out of resort that is in Aspen. So you could literally get to work, hit a couple runs, get in there, change, and then also if you're the morning, a lot of times you would get given that early out where you could hit the last runs on the mountain as well. And same if you're the nighttime cooks, you're trying to wake up in the morning, get to the mountain as early as you can, hit as many runs as you can before you go right into work.
Wow.
Fantastic. I remember when Frasca opened. I want to say, what year was that? 2009, 2010?
2004. It's all going on to
Oh
20
God!
years. Yeah. So next year is our
Wow!
big 20th celebration.
Congratulations to
Thank
Frasca.
you.
I know you guys
Thank you.
got
Yeah,
a Michelin
congratulations.
star. Am I saying that correct?
You are. Yes. So,
It's wherever
but
Ian goes, stars start showing up. Andrea, it's a trend. Unbelievable. I really feel that restaurant elevated the entire Colorado dining scene. My memory was Boulder had the Flagstaff House, which was this really
100%.
traditional, wonderful restaurant. But when Frasca opened, it really was a game changer for not just Boulder, but I think the entire mountain region. Tell us a little bit about the Frasca Restaurant Group because you mentioned Tavernetta. What are all the restaurants in the group?
And I always love to go back to the beginning of Frasca, but I always love Bobby tells a story that basically in San Francisco, some of his friends thought he was a little crazy moving to a small Boulder, Colorado, opening a restaurant inspired by a very obscure region of Italy, Friuli Venezia Giulia, that no one at that point had really heard of. And now what's already hard for any restaurant to do, 20 years later, being a successful fine dining restaurant, it's really testament to everyone who's worked for the group, which is, over 20 years, you get lots of different people, each person being a steward of the restaurant. It's really amazing and really crazy and taking each next evolutionary step. And then within the Frasca Hospitality group, you have Frasca, of course, Frasca Food and Wine, which is also co-joined. So we share, which is very unique. We share a back of the house area, the dish area, and all the back hallways with now Pizzeria Alberico. So it's a pizza, Neapolitan style pizza and small bites, really wonderful. Just went through a whole remodel. It's gorgeous. The food is awesome as well. And we really get to work with them on co-sourcing ingredients and all of that stuff. And it's really fun to have the different types of cooks and things all working together and learning from each other. And then you have in downtown Tavernetta, which is kind of like I would call the most grand restaurant within the group. Large amounts of people every day dining, super busy every day, a little more wide region focus point, so they can jump all over Italy, making all these wonderful things, really inspired by a classic taverna. And then you also have Sunday Vinyl, which is where my wife, Clara Klein, is the sommelier at. It's one of my favorite restaurants, but it's kind of been the more loud. They play vinyl music. Was really inspired by Bobby's Sundays, classic restaurateur, taking his day off and getting inspired to a restaurant. But him and his wife would listen to vinyls on Sundays and drink wine and just really enjoy their Sundays. And we're thinking about how much people would enjoy that as well. So really fun, little more. They actually have no Italian wine, and then little more inspired by the music, pair music to the wine, and the wine to the music, and all of this fun stuff. And then actually one of my really close friends who had also worked at Restaurant Eugene, and Murad, has been taking over as the executive chef there. So the food is going through a really fun evolution and really changing their focus to be going in that next step.
That's awesome. Let's jump into the heart of the conversation today. With a name like Palazzola, a beautiful Italian last name, we're here to talk about Pecorino Romano cheese today. And I feel like it's a cheese that kind of, obviously it's been around hundreds of years, but it's, with the popularity of cacio e pepe and Roman dishes. And I think, now tell me, Palazzola, what part of, where's your family from in Italy?
Yeah, so we're from Rome, a little suburb outside of Rome. I kind of grew up. My grandfather was an immigrant, and he was also in the military. So, as growing up, we didn't find out as much. They weren't as open about all these stories. So, it's all those 23andMe's and finding out Ancestry.com and diving into it more, because he passed away when I was younger. So, it's really trying to find more out through my dad and for myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you have roots in the place where Pecorino Romano comes from.
Exactly.
Does it find its way into your cooking? Is it in, is it being used at Frasca? Is it being used in, at Tavernetta and some of the other restaurants in the group?
100%. I would put it under the top two cheeses from Italy for me. In that section of Parmigiano Reggiano, it kind of gets hidden behind that. But Pecorino Romano especially would be the cheese that we use. It's probably one of my favorite cheeses. Obviously, cacio e pepe being the highlight of that cheese, just physically being Pecorino Romano, black pepper, pasta, little pasta water.
Is it me, or like I feel like cacio e pepe in the last 5 years
Oh
all of a
yeah.
sudden became a thing, right? I mean, it's been around forever.
It's gotten a TikTok stardom, I think.
Yeah, right. It's so simple. You just mentioned it. Basically, 3 ingredients. What about it is so delicious? And you mentioned Parmigiano Reggiano. What are the differences between? I have so many questions now. What are the differences between Parmigiano Reggiano and Pecorino Romano? And also, Andrea, I'm curious. Do you use Pecorino Romano at home? Do you use, Parmigiano? What? And Ian, tell us, also at the restaurant, like how are they used?
Yeah, I mean, the difference, mainly is the type of milk that's used to create the cheese, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
Parmigiano Reggiano is a cow's milk cheese. Pecorino Romano is a sheep's milk cheese. Pecorino is definitely going to be aged a little bit less, so it's slightly softer, grassier, stronger in its flavor. Salt, and I think salty really comes to mind. Where Parmigiano Reggiano, I would almost say it's a little sweeter because it is aged longer, and you are getting those crystals and whatnot from the aging process. In my house, we're a Parmigiano Reggiano house, if I'm being perfectly honest. But there's always, if you're doing cacio e pepe, Pecorino is the star of the show. Ian, what about you?
No, you nailed it. You told it exactly. And I found what was really unique with why Pecorino comes from that area is because back in the Roman times, that's what they had. So they produced lots of sheep. So the sheep's milk cheese was naturally what they had. And the reason it really stuck around is the Roman legionnaires would carry it around with them. So it was a high protein, high caloric, wouldn't go bad, something they could eat to keep themselves healthy, high salt content. I'm a both. So I keep both cheeses at my house because I will use it for either or. I'll looking for that nuttier, saltier aspect from that Parmesan. Like she said, the
Mhm.
Parmesan will be aged longer, more crystallized. We used a Pecorino that's around that 6 month to 1 year aging. So you get a little softer, a little more meltability into it. So something like a duck ragu, I may use a Pecorino in there just to give a little more creaminess aspect.
I love it.
You know what I read, John?
What'd you read, Andrea?
I read this article that, back in ancient Rome, they would age the cheese by burying it in the ground. It keeps it
Like
cold, the
fossa. Yep.
temperature. And
Yep.
during COVID, when there was this surplus of Pecorino, they were actually burying the cheese to preserve it.
Oh, that's very cool.
Isn't that cool? I thought it was really cool. As soon as I typed in Pecorino Romano, just doing my research, and that was like the first article, and a lot of things led back to it. So I think it definitely, it's a cool story.
I want to go back to cacio e pepe for a second. I actually will blend Parmigiano Reggiano and Pecorino Romano when I make it, just for a little. I don't know.
Is that like a sin?
I don't know, but I was in a competition
Ian says yes.
A
with
little
our
bit.
cheese
Traditionalists may say
with
so.
our in-house cheese expert Jennifer Sussman challenged me to a cacio e pepe battle a couple of years ago, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna like pull out a couple of tricks, and I blended Parmigiano and cacio e pepe. And then my real secret was I took the most minuscule amount of freshly grated nutmeg and worked it in there with
Oh,
the pepper.
I
And
think
needless
like
to say,
Italian grandmothers like
I
rolling in
did,
their
yeah.
graves.
I did win the competition though,
You did?
because I figured it was, it's if you're just doing cheese and pepper, how are you going to separate yourself from the competitor? So I put something that maybe I thought the judges would think was a little weird.
But what else besides cacio e pepe? Like you mentioned, a duck
The duck
ragu.
ragu, yep.
So what else?
Yeah, we'll try it actually with both side by side. We'll try different types of cheeses, which one emulsifies in better, which one's adding what we're looking for. Sometimes you want the cheese to hide in there, to not notice, just to add a creamier texture to it. Sometimes you really want the cheese to stand out. That's where I think sometimes Parmesan really highlights, because you can use a 36-month aged Parm, and that's going to be salty. People are going to notice it faster. So like you were saying, your cacio e pepe probably won because people were noticing a little more nuanced tastes that probably add to the American palate as well too.
Will restaurants serve Pecorino Romano just as as a table cheese, as a chunk of cheese, or is it just too sharp for that?
You definitely can, but you're not going to see it as much as you are going to see like the aged hard Parmesans that are going to be
Yeah.
more like Goudas and whatnot.
Yeah, but what about like pecorino? I mean, this isn't a pecorino romano, but I'm thinking like
The
pecorino
Toscana.
toscano, papato,
That's
a truffle pecorino.
exactly. So they will take some of those other pecorinos that fall outside of the Lazio region, and they will age them less as well. So they'll have, I always kind of, it makes me think of Gouda. They'll have those creamier versions that are softer, that 100% you could have with a table cheese on some bread and honey.
Ooh.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that whole. I mean, if we really break down, and I never really gave this a lot of thought. Pecorino is basically means sheep's milk, right? Or
Of
sheep's milk
sheep.
cheese
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
sheep, because that Pecorino de Pienza that we're talking about, which is a much younger, much softer, definitely a table eating cheese. I almost feel
exactly.
like it has nothing to do with Pecorino Romano. And while
Yeah,
we're
it's in like
talking
its
about
own
Pecorino,
class.
we could also talk about ricotta salata. Is that
Ooh.
a Pecorino too?
Nope, but it is a pressed salted ricotta, basically.
Yeah.
Ooh, I
Okay. Good.
love ricotta
Yeah,
salata.
That's
same.
a
Ooh.
nice. That's a nice item.
Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing, Andrea.
I know. I feel like I have, but like, okay, I go back a little bit?
Please.
How did you start cooking? Like, you said where
Oof.
you're from. You said you went to culinary school, but like, do you
Italian
have,
grandparents.
yeah, is it like Italian grandparents and you grew up like in the kitchen?
It kind of is, but like I was saying, it's kind of interesting just being, I guess, the two side by side. I had an Italian grandfather, and then my family is Southern. So, growing up in the South, my mom just naturally cooking was her love language, So, and I also grew up in what I would call the Food Network era. So the Emeril
Yes.
Lagasse, the growth of that excitement when you're a kid, screaming bam and using all these different seasonings. So those moments of spending time around your family in the kitchen, cooking things, I think that slowly started it. And then naturally, my first job in high school was in a restaurant, a small local restaurant, and that started to entice the idea. And I never found a full connection to education, to natural schooling. I
Yeah.
never found the love and the passion. And then I went to culinary school, and it was just easy.
I
Every
really
class,
like that.
everything. I
Yeah.
just everything connected. It just the intuition of cooking seemed to come a little natural. Still, of course, takes a lot of effort and a lot of dedication and learning of the craft to have that intuition. But yeah, all the things seem to come with some time easily.
I'm thinking about kind of the future of chefs and culinary school and the maybe what kind of the Food Network era has done to our industry and like, oh, I'm going to go to culinary school and be on the Food Network. What advice would you give? And, maybe for someone who's listening who, I feel the same way. Education wasn't really for me, but food was. So how, what's your advice to them?
That's a good question, and it's a question I've thought about a lot. And this next generation, and I'm
Hmm.
uniquely in between these unique generations where I can relate to the younger, but I've also been a part of the older. The kitchens
Like
that
John's generation?
I didn't say that. The kitchens that had a little more of a black and white, a little more screaming, a little more straightforward. Either you do it this way or it's the highway. And
Yep.
this next generation, it's a little more teaching, a little more showing, a little more understanding of the gray between the black and the white. But the tip or the piece of advice I would give is to realize that nothing happens overnight. Lots of cooks these days, when they get out of culinary school, I don't know if it's what they're being taught in culinary school, but they think they're going to be a chef tomorrow, and that being dedicated to that garmager station, or what we'd call an anti-freda station, for a year is not a bad thing. You're going to still be learning a year later. Trust me. You're still going to have things you can work on, still going to have things you can clean, things you can do right, things you can learn while working that station. And don't always be so obsessed with the next step or the next station and looking for the next restaurant. I think what Frasca has actually done really well is trying to keep people for a long time. And that, I don't know if it's the American workforce, but like staying at a place of any type is actually an awesome thing. And you'll grow so much the longer you stay in some place for a long time. And it's not always a bad thing to be in a restaurant for 5 to 10 years.
Talk to us about the Frasca experience because I'm embarrassed to say I've never eaten there. I've I actually, a couple of weeks ago when I was in Colorado, I didn't get a chance to eat there, but I was walking down Pearl Street, Andrea, at about 5 o'clock at night, maybe
Hmm.
a little bit later. The sky was lit up like this beautiful Colorado. They get these sunsets that are spectacular. That was like beautiful red sky as the sun was setting over the mountains. And I walked by Frasca, and I actually saw Bobby Stuckey in there talking to the team before service. Ian, you were probably right there with him. And I was like, "Oh, look how beautiful and charming this restaurant is." Tell us, what is it like to dine at Frasca? What are some of are there signature dishes? You mentioned that it's the cuisine of Friuli, right? I mean,
Yeah.
talk to us about the food and the an experience if one goes to eat there.
Yeah, and I would say starting from the beginning, if you've been a guest that's eaten there for the past 19 years, you will have noticed this, but it's a restaurant group and a restaurant in specific itself that it never sleeps on its laurels, never is okay with what it was, always looking to be what it wants to be for the future, driving influence around the industry. But one thing that always jumps out to me is comfort. So, if you go to Frosco, you're going to walk in the front door, you're always going to be greeted by someone with a smile. If you have a jacket, we're always going to take that jacket from you, at least offer to. Everything we build is about warmth and connection, let alone purely Venezia Giulia and the inspiration behind the food. The front of the house is so warm. That's why they have won every award they've won. That's why they won the Michelin Service Award, because we greet you with a smile throughout the evening. We don't rush you. We want you to be comfortable. I can easily say that it is probably the most comfortable restaurant seats I've ever sat in. And that comes with probably a loss to how many people can seat at each table. All those things they understand, but they take them in a very thoughtful response of like, we want you to be warm, comfortable. The music's just right. The wallpapers is unique. Obviously, the wine list is top of the world. And then when you start your way into the kitchen, it's evolved so many times. We have this lots of tours come into the kitchen because it is a very beautiful kitchen that you can show to a lot of people. A lot of work has gone into keeping it clean as well. But as you venture into this kind of alleyway into the kitchen, to your left is what we call the polishing room. It's where everyone in the front of house ends up starting out, but that actually was Frasca's original kitchen. So it's very tiny, very small. We have employees that have worked at Frasca since pretty much the opening, and they talk about how interesting it was expoing out of that area and working out of that small kitchen. Now we have the most luxurious kitchen I've been afforded to work in. Murad was also very nice, but this has really been organized in multiple layers and processes to be worked in really clean and efficiently. And it kind of shoots down towards the dish area. And the pastry team has an entire section. The Antifreda has their whole section, and then it goes on to the line where you have your Anticaldo, your Primi, your Contorni, and your Secondi. And then we have a few different styles of dining. We have a Quattro Piatti, which is kind of like a 4-course tasting that you choose within your own section there. It has a few options within each area. And then there will, of course, be some luxurious ingredients that you could supplement up on there. And then we have our Friulano tasting experience, as we call it. And that's a 7 to 9 course, can go up and down within there, really hyper-focused into Friuli. And then we have our third experience, which is kind of what we've dubbed the chef's table experience. But you actually 2 to 4 people, you book a table within the kitchen. The chefs run almost every single course. We talk about it. You get to watch the action. Busy night, you get to hear us calling for sets and holding our fingers up and kind of being a part of the service for the night, which has also been really exciting. And that one is even more hyper-focused, really taking inspiration from the book, all of those types of things, and reinterpreting and having fun with some of these classic dishes.
Wow.
Incredible. And I think Andrea, while you were talking, was on Expedia looking for plane tickets to Denver.
Sending an email, trying to make that reservation.
And if I could add one thing that's really unique about Frasca and Friuli Venezia Giulia in particular is, and when people come to the restaurant in general, they may be expecting something different, which is most Italian restaurants, a lot more tomato sauce based, a lot more southern Italy. We're a lot more of the border of, Slovenia, Hungary, Croatia. So we have a lot more of that cold climate, a lot more of the polenta, rice, celery root and potatoes and different types of cheeses that people may not have experienced.
I have so many questions that we don't have enough time, but
I know. Is there like a signature dish?
There is. So there is one dish that even at the chef's table experience, we make everyone have back there, but it's called a frico caldo. Frico can be made in tons of different ways. Caldo just meaning closed. Ours is pan fried in a cast iron. It's Yukon potatoes, Idaho potatoes with a Matasio cheese, very unique cheese that comes from the Carnic Alps there. Little onion, again, pan fried, topped with a little parsley vinaigrette.
Wow.
The questions I had that I don't, and Andrea, you tell me if we have enough time, is one, being in Colorado, it's very different than being in a restaurant in New York City or Los Angeles or San Francisco, where there's a very long history of either Italian or European heritage, where obtaining the ingredients that you're using in a European restaurant, it's never easy, but it's far less challenging than I think than being in Colorado. How have you found it to get the type of ingredients that you want? Because I imagine that things have to be flown in from around the world or flown in from, other parts of the United States.
100%. Luckily, I'm sure 19 years ago, they had quite a lot of trouble. I think Denver, Boulder, and this small community has really cherished Italian food for a long time. So some of the best restaurants around the area have been Italian. So there are amazing Italian importers, cheese importers. So we sometimes have to get our cheese over a week out and get it straight shipped in from Italy. And sometimes that coincides with Italian holidays and all those unique things. So I would say just like most restaurants, but yeah, procurement of goods as the winter comes can be more difficult, of course.
Hmm. And I also, one other question is about staffing, because that's the biggest challenge for restaurants around the country in the last few years, particularly during COVID. But I also think that being in Boulder, Colorado is a place that is so desirable to live. It offers a lot to so many people as far as a lifestyle, that I would think that people would be knocking at the door to work in the kitchen or front of the house in Boulder. Is that the case?
I think just like any restaurant, we go through waves. Obviously, the addition of Michelin, giving people, someone like me when I was younger who wanted to find a place where I could experience those types of kitchens, I had to move to the coasts or a Chicago type of place. And now you can look at a place like Boulder, can entice a whole different type of people. Our cooks bike in the summers. They go hiking all the time. They go skiing together in the mornings and get to work on time. We really enforce the dual life that like cooking can't be everything, and your life does have to have other things in it that can give you joy and excitement. So you're not just revolving around the stress of work and all of those things. So luckily right now, again, we have been fully staffed. The Michelin star, of course, helps with that. And then Frasca Hospitality Group as a whole, the whole house hospitality. I mean, I can't talk enough about that here. You can give a livable wage to back of house employees that could actually entice them to want to stay for a long period of time. Whereas in my beginning career, there was nothing that really enticed you to stay for those long periods of time because the value of money could only go up 50 cents, $1, 25 cents here and there. The tip structure can really affect how much money you're making. It's really amazing. And we've seen huge strides in that.
Is cooking part of your home life as well?
I guess I think I speak for probably most cooks, but I always laugh when I tell my dad this, but my dad's a dentist, and I doubt what he wants to do when he comes home is clean people's teeth. But I do love cooking. It has to probably coincide with a weekend. I'm
Yes.
lucky. My wife is an amazing cook and loves cooking, and she has the drive when she gets home to do that. So it's a lot of me, I guess, nitpicking her, telling
Sure.
her, do this, do that, flip this. But yeah,
What are the 5 staples that have to be in your kitchen at all times?
I mean, salt is a obvious, but sometimes you go to people's houses and they don't have the proper salts, but a good kosher salt, diamond
Mhm.
crystal, always in the house. Um, Becoming against seed oils. So I would say lots of olive oils, good oils that are healthy for you. Um, I love sneaking nutritional yeast in things.
Me
Sure.
too.
So that's a secret flavor bomb that I like to quiz people if they know it's in there.
I don't think we've ever had
Um,
that one.
I love
That's
nutritional yeast. It's a
exciting.
super good way to make vegan food or even
Sure.
vegetarian food more,
It gives you that
umami.
nuttiness almost like a parmesan or
It does.
a
It does.
cheesy cheddary. Yeah.
It's
100%.
my popcorn go-to.
Nice.
100%. I would say that's a good one. Soy sauce. All mine are going to be salt probably, but my wife is half Japanese. Her family's Japanese, so we cook tons of rice, soy sauce, all of that kinds of stuff. And then I would say the staples, onions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know mine sound boring, but I would literally say salt, onions, good oil, nutritional yeast, soy sauce. Outside of that,
I
it's normal
I call
groceries.
those foundational core
That's what I.
items.
That's what
I
I.
always love to have onions in my house. I always love to have lemons, and all the things you
Lemons as
mentioned are,
well, 100%.
What is
yeah.
it? Salt, acid, fat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The restaurant Eugene, he always said FASA, fat, acid, salt, and aromatics.
There
I'll
you go.
never forget that.
FASA.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ian Palazzola, joining us from Frasca Restaurant in Boulder, Colorado. This has been so fun. Andrea, you know, we just opened a Chef's Warehouse location in Denver, Colorado, covering the entire state of Colorado. So now we have a real good excuse to come visit you. I'm sure I'll be out there in a few weeks to talk to the team and present products to some of the restaurants in the area, and for sure you'll be on my list. And this has been just a great time talking about Pecorino Romano and just talking about Colorado and food in general. I cannot wait to eat at Frasca Restaurant. Congratulations on that Michelin star. It's like I said earlier, wherever Ian goes, the Michelin inspectors follow him, I
You're going
guess.
to have so
I
many
guess so.
chefs reaching out to you soon. Come
Yeah.
work for
Yeah.
me. Thank you, Ian.
Thank
Thanks.
you
This has
all.
been a great conversation. Take care. Hey, Andrea.
John.
How are you?
Wonderful. We have a really special guest here today.
We have a legendary cheese-making producer with us today, which is so exciting. It's not often that we have a guest where the name and his family name is synonymous with the finest Pecorino cheese, Pecorino Romano in the world.
Absolutely. Usually we have like a representative, of the brand, but we have Pierluigi from Fulvi Pecorino here today.
Pierluigi Sini from Sini Fulvi.
Sini Fulvi.
Great to have you, Pierluigi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, John. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's a wonderful opportunity for me. So really, thank you.
We're excited. We love Pecorino cheese. We love talking about Pecorino. Talk to us about Sini Fulvi. You're the Sini. Who's the Fulvi?
So we have to go back a little bit in time because I'm actually the third generation right now. So it started with my grandfather. He was Giuseppe Sini, his name. He was a farmer and eventually started making a little bit of cheese, right next to the farm. And then when my dad graduated from high school, he joined basically the family company, if you can call it that way. That was still like in the farming business mainly, and they started making a little bit more cheese. And then with his brother as well, they started working together. And eventually, my father, he was the main driver to basically acquire the Fulvi name, brand, and company and plant in 1972. So the Fulvi family was in the town of Viterbo, which is about 2 hours north of Rome, and they started making cheese in the 1930s. And then they were one of the first few exporters of Pecorino Romano in the U.S. with the Italian immigration in the 1950s, when cheese was actually still exported by boat in those wooden crates. So it was really the beginning of the Pecorino Romano history in the U.S. And so basically, my dad, had the idea of keeping the two names. The Fulvi name was still very, very, linked strongly to the Pecorino Romano, while the Sini name was the other cheese, which we call table cheese, the cachotas, which my family was making before. So they combined the two names, the two families, and then it became Sini Fulvi officially in 1972. And then eventually we established Sini Fulvi USA in 1991 when I personally moved to New York, and the rest is more recent history.
So you moved to New York and, kind of, I guess, what happened? I know you linked up with Forever Cheese and is that how it started getting sold in New York City, or?
Somehow, the exportation of the Fulvi Pecorino Romano was always ongoing for those many years. But the thing was that it was it was really mostly sold in the Italo-American markets, let's say. So it was really strongly linked to the Italian immigration, to the Italians, to Italo-Americans. And most people, outside of those markets, they didn't even know actually Pecorino was made from sheep milk. They didn't even know a lot of things about Italian cheeses because the education at the time, it wasn't as big. We're still talking about the time when there was no internet, and now, people didn't travel as much. So gather certain type of information was mainly related to importers, some distributors, but, so Italian cheese was in Italian stores and so on.
Very cool. So I think that Pecorino, just in America especially, in the last few years has exploded even more. And the reason I say that is I think of things like, things that you grew up on, Pierluigi, like cacio e pepe, pasta. I don't think that was on menus in the United States if you go back 10, 15 years, maybe here and there. Mm-hmm. But I think today it's become such a hot dish.
Absolutely.
I think all of the Roman pastas, whether it's a matricana or carbonara, we've got Roscioli restaurant that just opened in New York now. I think all of those cheeses are really having like a special time, that they're very popular.
Mm-hmm. And it's even being served you're seeing it now. I don't know if, Pierluigi, the pasta is being served in the wheel. You're having this theatrical kind of experience when you go out to eat that I don't really remember as much, when I was younger going out to eat, that maybe in the last 5 to 7 years. Are you noticing that too, or has Sini Fulvi noticed?
Yes, very true. And actually, it happened almost parallelly, even in Italy more. I think as things start to evolve in the US, in other parts of Italy, because, of course, certain pecorinos, certain dishes are more linked to certain regions. In this case, more like the central and southern part of Italy. But we've seen even like a rediscovery of a lot of these dishes, even in places like, Milano, Torino, anywhere in Italy. And in the US, it has been really, honestly, a true explosion in the last few years, especially. I think COVID it didn't help a lot of things, but in this case, it helped a lot of people, like, stay home and cook a little bit more, look at recipe books, look at all kinds of dishes, making fresh pasta. So, hard cheese became, a very good, important part of all this. But yeah, I mean, those pastas have been around forever. And it's the two, I mean, I grew up with those two, but now they are really more known and people understand that, to really make a very good cacio e pepe, matriciana, carbonara. I also want to mention the grisha, which is the carbonara without the
Gricia.
guanciale.
Sure.
So that's another, so basically like we go like the Four Sisters.
The Roman
And
classics.
yeah, and Fulvi is honestly just the one perfect marriage, because to really make what you consider the perfect cream in those sauces, you just need a pecorino that has the essence of the territory, that has the right robust flavor, that makes you like have the little creaminess like you can have from any other pecorinos. And right now, Fulvi has been just a wonderful pairing for so many chefs and tons of people at home, which is we're very proud of, because that's really what we worked on for many years.
Let's talk about the different types of pecorino,
Right.
because we're talking right now specifically about Sini Fulvi Pecorino Romano. That's 100% sheep's milk?
Correct.
And what are some of the other types of pecorino cheese? Because there's pecorino from
Toscano,
Tuscany and Pienza, totally different product.
Yeah, so pecorino, it's the generic word in Italian for cheese made from sheep's milk. But as many things in the food industry, especially that have to do a lot with nature, every small detail makes a big difference. The territory, the weather, the milk, the history. So they're all similar in a way, because you can just put them in the same, let's say, pecorino family. But then when you go and try each one of them and trying to understand the history, they all bring different things to the table. They can be sharp, they can be mild, they can be soft, they can be harder, and they still represent the territory in a very unique way. That's the interesting thing about really understanding the history of the territory and the people and why the different two. And then once you get to know them, every small detail again makes a little bit different. So you can tell that they really are different as time as they can be, even though they are still grouped in kind of one big family.
So, sorry.
I was going to say, how many different types of Pecorino Romano does Sini Fulvi make?
So we make only Pecorino Romano Fulvi, what we call Fulvi. Basically, it's only one production. It's we made the same way, artisanal, that we made since basically it goes back to Fulvi in the 1950s, by my dad's family, since 1972. And it's only one. We make one production. It's all made the same way. Same thing for the Italian market, for the US market. It's just one thing, has always been the way. So we're very proud of the two, because we are really one of the very few companies left in Lazio to not only make Pecorino Romano the Lazio, which is the one that is certified to be made in Lazio, can be only aged in Lazio. It can only be made with milk produced in Lazio. So this is one particular certification that we'll be able to obtain from the government about 10 years ago, to try to differentiate ourselves from the Sardinian Pecorino Romano, because for many years they both had the same name officially, and even in Sardinia it's still called Pecorino Romano DOP, but it was planning to do. It was very hard for us, to really, educate consumers when actually the label and officially everything gave you the same name. So we were able to obtain this by working a lot with the government, and now we have this certification too, which we are the only one of the 3-4 companies left in Lazio to use. We are the largest, but we still have huge connection to the territory. We still have farmers that have been with us for 34 years. I was in Rome the other week, and I was at our plant, and this old man showed up. I was like, "Oh wow, I haven't seen you since you were a kid. We've been giving milk to your family for 40 years, and it's still one of the farmers near us, and they have a couple hundred sheep, and they still do the same thing, and we still be able to make cheese from people with milk from people like this." So that's very very, very exciting for us to be able to continue this legacy.
That's an amazing tradition. And I'm wondering, are there different ages, or is everything
I was going to ask like the
aged
qualities
for X amount of months?
So Pecorino Romano DOP by law is to be aged at least 5 months. We've been aging Fulvi for always, forever, for at least 10 months. So our ideal aging is about 10, 12 months. It's what we feel the cheese has, the right combination of texture and flavor. Sardinia and Pecorino Romano has traditionally been more considered more industrial. So it's always been, lower in price and not as good in flavor too, just because there's always been like an industrial production, basically like, for ingredient use, but people they use like, commercial gradients and go into ingredients too. We always wanted to be different. And not only because, the cheese is made in a different way, in a different place, with different milk, but also because, we have this attention to details as, we still hand salt to the cheese, which most people in Sardinia haven't done in really many, many years. They basically like, bake the cheese in in salt and water for a few days, and then you're done. We still hand salt the cheese like a few times in the first 3 months of life of cheese, which is really, really, very time consuming, a lot of labor. We need to just basically like to get the cheese like by hand and then roll it and get the salt and then do it again in a few weeks. So, and we still also age the cheese in the original caves of the plant. This plant was built by the Fulvi family to specifically be like the biggest producer of Pecorino Romano in those years. And we have basically like a certain number of caves underground. They cover almost the entire surface of the plant, and we still bring the cheese downstairs. We call it and we call it the cantina, but it's probably the gives the best translation in English. He goes down there a few days after it's made, and then everything else happens down there, and up until like it's at least 10 12 months where we have to do the final step, which is selecting it and then eventually coating, packing, whatever we need to do to be able to sell it. So it's a very, very different process than most pecorinos in Sardinia. Very different.
So it's the milk, it's the aging, it's the salting, it's the caves that make the Fulvi Pecorinos far superior than any of the kind of the counterparts. Are there any other like qualities that kind of stand out for Fulvi Pecorino?
Yeah, you name most of them. I would never say superior in my opinion, just because to me it's still the most important thing is that it's unique. Then I like how the people do judge what they like better too. But for us, we want to really make sure that we point out how unique it is.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's the territory, is definitely the milk, because the milk in Lazio is very, very different from Sardinia. Not only we have different type of sheep, but it just every little thing makes a difference in nature. The weather and the water and the way the people are, everything.
Sounds like a true art, John.
Yeah.
Like versus just like, kind of, I'm going to make this cheese as quickly as possible so we can sell it as quickly as possible and make as much money. It's this is like, something that there's history and there's a formula, and they're not going to, kind of waver because it's so important to like the history of the cheese and the region and the farmers.
It sounds like nothing's changed in 70 plus
cool.
years, 80 years. Pierluigi, you mentioned, and we talked a little bit earlier about the like classic Roman pastas.
Mm-hmm.
What and I always think of Pecorino Romano as a grating cheese, which is great in cooking. What are some other uses? Is it ever used as a table cheese for eating, or is that not something?
That's a great point, John. And actually one of the things I've always been pushing in educating consumers for my entire life. Fulvi is so different because also we have a very different texture than most Pecorino Romanos. The cheese is never as dry because of the butterfat content, but also the way we actually age it. So even if we were to age it for 2 years, which we've done and we have tried, the cheese still maintains a very good soft texture you would think a cheese, the hardness to have. So it's actually a great table cheese. If you love a cheese that's robust, that's piquant, that is sharp. I was with some friends, last week in Rome. I brought, of course, always, to bring cheese. So
you carry it with you in your bag all the time?
One of my friends, he was just coming from work, and he saw this chunk of pecorino. He's like, I'm going to just eat pecorino tonight. That's going to be my dinner. So it's basically like, a chunk of pecorino, just like a little wine, a little piece of cheese. And if you love herbal cheese, great cheese for eating. It shreds really well. It's very important also, remind people that, a cheese like Fulvi, it's good to actually not slice it, but like you want to chisel the cheese to get the perfect texture. So, same thing with Parmigiano. If you slice the cheese, you won't get the same texture. And when you eat it, it won't really actually taste the same.
I think it's so important. Whether we have obviously the most of our listeners to this podcast are kitchen professionals
Mm-hmm.
and chefs and people who work in the industry. It's so important whether you are a chef or whether you're just a home cook, when you're out shopping for Pecorino Romano, that you ask for the Fulvi brand.
Absolutely.
Ask for Sini Fulvi. I know, I think of Italy and New York where, Tess, the cheese buyer, is such a huge fan of Sini Fulvi that when you go to the store, ask for that brand. Don't settle for just the regular cheese.
Yes.
And same at Chef's Warehouse. If you're buying, ask for the Fulvi brand because it does make a huge difference and it is so different from anything else that we have. One other question I have, and then I'll be quiet, is what is the best for table Pecorino Romano, Sini Fulvi? What's the best wine to pair with it as a table cheese?
Honestly, I always say I'm actually I'm a huge wine lover. I always say when the cheese is good and when the wine is good, almost anything goes.
Love it.
Then the rest, I think, is all about details and the way you are and what you like, honestly. Because if the two ingredients are really good, a great wine goes with anything. And a great piece of cheese almost just goes with any wine. Of course, ideally, if you want to have something more technical pairing, you wanna definitely use something that's red, and more on the medium full body. But even if you pick an interesting aromatic white wine, actually you'll be surprised it goes well too. I've had people love Pecorino with beer.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge beer fan, but I've seen people drink with it and they love it. But ideally, in general, people will say a medium to full body red wine, so it could be the Brunellos of the world, from Italy, the Amarone, the Barolos, but there is a lot of, even nice regular Sangiovese from Tuscany doesn't have to be a very aged wine, go well too. But honestly, if the wine is great, just drink it with anything.
I'm getting hungry, John.
I know.
I need a big glass of red and a big chunk of cheese and a thing of bread, and I'll be happy.
Maybe you can take me to Roscioli for lunch now that I'm thinking about it.
Well, this has been amazing. I cannot thank you enough for your time, your partnership with Forever Cheese and with Chef's Warehouse. If you're a chef and you're looking for the Fulvi Pecorino, please check out chefswarehouse.com and try this cheese. It's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pierluigi. Such a treat to have you on. Thank you. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, guys. It really is my pleasure. And I want to thank you everybody at Chef's Warehouse, every customer out there, everybody that supported us over the years too. It really means a lot to us. So we continue to do the best we can to bring you the best possible Pecorino Fulvi, and we're proud of being in the US. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Ingredient Insiders. Follow us on Instagram at Ingredient Insiders. You can find the products we discussed on today's episode at chefswarehouse.com or at your favorite specialty retailer.